Okay, now I saw one of these phantom time hypothesis videos a couple of months ago. So I have to do this response to them to bring up a very specific technical point. Now, I did some work for an article going back, 20 years now, I think. God, I think I did this before 2000-ish, maybe. Now, this was on solar eclipses in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles. This was in a previous life on Windows, like 20 years ago. Now, I've managed to find the archive of the files that I used. I can't find the actual full article that I wrote. I can't find a lot of the data that I used. You know, I've got a lot of data missing over 20 years, you know, who hasn't? Unfortunately as well, I'm now on Linux, and I haven't set up any Stellarium software at the moment, so I'll have to do that at another point and do a follow-up video and have another investigation. But what I thought I'd show you is just the results of what I found 20 years ago. And of course, this was looking at it without any kind of grind at all. The point of the exercise was to pin down definitively the timing of the writing of a document by using solar eclipses. Now, this phantom time hypothesis here, and this particular flavour of it, talks about came about in 1986. German historian Herbert Illich developed the phantom time hypothesis. The theory states that the years 619 to 911 do not actually exist. So everything between that time period was basically fabricated. So we are actually living in the 18th century. And that's fine, you know, I'm happy with that kind of hypothesis. Some people really get their heads in a twist, but, you know, you have to understand that the dates are just completely arbitrary. What isn't arbitrary is the amount of time. The date is arbitrary. So the 18th century, it doesn't matter. It's what is in question is the amount of time since these supposed historical events occurred and now. So if it's X number of years, then we are living in the 18th century. And who cares? We're not going to change its name to the 18th century. We're just going to carry on because this works at the moment for us. We're going to have to revise our history. Well, we're going to have to revise our history anyway, but that's a whole other video. Now, further to that, New Earth theory is it's a rounded off full 1,000 years, and it's based on this I being used in a date, standing for Jesus, standing for Jesus. So that's the year of Jesus, 527, which, you know, I mean, it doesn't necessarily scan because you've already, you know, you've got AD here. If you can see that on this, you can see it's already signifying AD, Year of Our Lord. So does it necessarily need to signify it again? There are other examples that yeah, the X is an example as well for standing for Jesus. Oh yeah, so here 1595, I think that is. So that's Anno Jesus 595, but we've read it as Anno 1595. So I can see her point exactly. I mean, this doesn't look printed though. This is all illustrated, because there is. I mean, this is printed. So it's potentially that the I is used as a printing convention. It's, you know, it's to save blocks. So you use the I 3 times. You use it for a 1, you use it for an I, and you use it for a J. And I mean, after all, the Romans did the same. They used the I as a 1, a J, and an I, the same letter 3 times. So for print, you know, in the early days of print, it's saving resources. So I think it's a printing convention, and it's a printing convention that has bled into drawing as well, which is, you know, this has come down from the Roman era. The dot is a problem, because they are quite consistent on the dots. She is right on that. And you know, I just want to make it clear, I'm not attacking New Earth here. I've watched a lot of her videos. I have a lot of respect for New Earth and the research she's done. I think she's absolutely fantastic. A lot of the stuff on Napoleon in Russia is phenomenal. The problem with this, well, we'll see. Let's have a look at the problem. So I was looking at the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles, and there's a number of mentions in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles about solar eclipses. So here's, so AD 538, this year the sun was eclipsed 14 days before the calends of March, from before morning until 9. Now here's a problem for it, as a historian investigating this. We have to dissect this all the way down. So unfortunately what we're dealing with here is somebody's baseline interpretation of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles. Now let me give you a sort of a further example of what I mean by that. Now here's 2 passages from the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles, pretty much the same. This year, Cynewulf, with the consent of the West Saxon Council, deprived Calibrate, his relative, for unrighteous deeds of his kingdom except Hampshire. In this year, Cynewulf and the West Saxon councillors deprived his kinsman Calibrate of the kingdom because of his unjust actions except Hampshire. So you see, there's some minor differences this year, with the consent of the West Saxon Council and the West Saxon councillors. So it's semantic differences. There's differences in the spelling of the name. The major problem with these 2 passages, I mean, you can read them both, and it's like reading a translation of Russian poetry. You can find differences in the English translations from translation to translation. There's no definitive method of translating a passage from one language to another, unless you get down to, you know, phrases of 1 or 2 words, and even then. But the major problem with these 2 phrases, even though they're saying exactly the same thing, and we can read them both, I think, yep, they are the same, depending on which translation you go to, one is labelled as 755, the other is labelled as 757. So we've got a 2-year discrepancy here. Now when we're talking about a couple of hundred years or 1,000 years, that might not seem a lot, but when we're looking at solar eclipses, obviously 2 years is just right out. It's, you know, it needs to be on it. So we have problems with translation. Now in this simple phrase, we'll take the date as correct. This year the sun was eclipsed 14 days before the calends of March, from before morning until 9. So that the calends of March is the beginning of March. So 14 days before the end of March is 28 minus 14, should be the 14th of February. That's 5:38. So if we go to Sky Globe, now these are screen dumps I took from Sky Globe when I did this originally, like 20 years ago sometime. So February 15th, I mean that's close enough I guess. 14 days before the calendar of March. The only, I mean we're 1 day out, but we're a day out only because it's not made clear whether it's inclusive or not. 14 days before the calendar of March. 15th of February. 14th. Okay. And as you can see from this, we have the sun and the moon about to enter eclipse, and this is 10:24 AM. Here's another problem with the translations, and that is, well, from before morning, so that doesn't make practical sense unless it means before the sun actually rose. Did the sky lighten, then darken, and then the sun rose whilst it was being eclipsed? So the sun actually came above the horizon under, you know, in the process of being eclipsed, from before morning until 9. So until 9, they didn't count the hours in that sense. They used the Latin terms of like matan, and that was based on prayer times. So the basic sources for the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles, they are compiled from 4 sources, and they come from different parts of the country. I think there's Peterborough, Cambridge, possibly Winchester, and somewhere else. Now they're not. There's a lot of controversy around the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles, and basically what this kind of book is a compilation of all the 4. Now as we saw earlier, some of them don't exactly agree on the dates, so there's a kind of growing consensus on how to merge and translate the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles. So that's where I need to investigate, is down into the source, which means looking into learning Anglo-Saxon, which is what I started to do 20 years ago. So I need to pick this up again, and I'll have a look into this. So anyway, we have to take these kinds of phrasings, mentioning the hours of the day, especially in the morning like that. It's a modern anachronism. they've not only translated it, they've modified it as well and modernized it. So that, half an hour over 9. Yeah. So 5:38, 14th of February. We're a day out, but there's the eclipse. And as you see so 2 hours later, 12:30, the sun is, the moon is very much covering the sun there. So this is unequivocal. This is and it has. So the default location is London. Now, the other thing I'm looking at as well, the way the eclipse is described, I'm trying to get down to that because that may give me a clue as to where they were when this was compiled. Now, the other thing as well is, don't forget that we don't exactly know how they were compiled and how they were written. So these monks, they weren't writing under their own volition. They were clearly handed the material that they were to transpose or to write down. So dispatches and news and whatever, news on births and deaths of royalty and things would come into these monasteries and they would be recorded, and that was grown and embellished. And one of the earliest things that they embellished this with was astronomical events. So the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles started with just a kind of a chronicle of kings, then it adds celestial events, and then they flesh out from there until it becomes almost a diary, almost a journal, day by day. By the 12th, 13th century, it's quite a full document. But early on, there's not a lot of material. Now, you have to ask when it was written. Was this a rolling document? So at some point they started the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles and they were pulling information in from the past. Then at some point they caught up and they're writing it as it happens. Now, does that mean that the monk is sat in his monastery and looking out at the sun? So when he declares from before morning until 9, is that from the point of view of the person who was writing the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, or is that from the point of view of the person who compiled the news on the eclipse? So it's possible that when you're dealing with the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles, you're also dealing with the Anglo-Saxon clerical world, which is not necessarily the same as the political world. So you could be dealing with an item or an event that happens, say, in Ireland and is recorded in Denmark or Germany. So it's possible that the people recording this, or the people writing this down, did not witness the eclipses. And it's also possible that they were, that they could have been sat doing their daily job, transcribing, then, oh, holy moly, look at that, the sun has just gone dark. Let's write that down. There's no real way of knowing. And it's a major investigation. It means going to the source of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles, which means not only learning Anglo-Saxon, but learning the demonic Anglo-Saxon as well. And I've fought with Anglo-Saxon in text. It's kind of okay. It helps if you know a little bit ancient Greek and Latin. So AD 538, there is a definitive solar eclipse. The next one is 540. This year the sun was eclipsed on the 12th day before the calends of July. So what's that? January, February, March, April, May, June, July. So that's what, 31, take away 12, so 29. So about the 19th of June, 540. 540, we've got the 20th of June, again with that one day out, so maybe they're talking inclusively, as it were. There's the start of the path. Again, the sun is going slightly faster than the moon, so as time goes on, the sun is slowly going to catch up and is going to slide behind the moon. And there's the time, June the 20th, 540 AD, 10:24 AM. A couple of hours later, there's about a 50% eclipse. How did they describe it? The sun was eclipsed and the stars showed themselves full nigh half an hour. So again, that kind of description, would you get that from a 50% eclipse, the stars showing? Maybe not. So, you know, you need to investigate where the 100% eclipse is. And okay, 664. 664. And again, I don't have all the data on this. I don't have all my pictures that I did, but 664, 1st of May, on the 11th of May. So we've got a discrepancy here, but we are, you know, we're 10 days out. We have a solar eclipse there, but not on the 11th of May. But it is in 664, so it's kind of close enough. You know, solar eclipses are rare enough that 1st of May, 11th of May, you know, you could easily see that as a transcription error. The next one, 733. I think we're missing some here. So yeah, we don't have 733. Some of these I did fail to find, but I'm going to have to go through this again. So 879, no eclipse there. Then we do have an eclipse in 809, which is not mentioned. And 1135. So Lamas. So we don't have 1135, but we have 1136. That's 1 year out. 1140 in Lent. 13th day before the calends of April, so middle of March. 1140. Yeah, March 20th. 4 p.m. See, and again, this is, you know, so after this in the Lent, the sun and the day darkened about the noontide of the day, when men were eating, and they lighted candles to eat by. That was the 13th day before the calends of April. So you know, what do we mean by noontide of the day? Noontide doesn't necessarily mean noon. This is, this is 4:30 in the afternoon. So this is tea time, if you like. Instead of lunchtime, it's tea time, which is kind of what they were doing when men were eating, I guess. So that's an investigation into the eclipses. Now, like I say, so 538 is pretty much spot on. So what we have here is for the missing, or for the 1,000 years, or the missing time to be correct, all four, well, need to find out where the solar eclipses are mentioned in which of the 4 chronicles. So if they're all mentioned in only one, is it possible that that one chronicle has somehow been forged or doctored to include these eclipses for the very reason of wag the dog, of putting things in the archive, seeding the archive, so that later on, if people happen to go and check, they are presenting their own evidence, like I am doing now. So but if these eclipses match and are mentioned in all 4 eclipses, all 4 chronicles, and they correlate, then that's stretching it a bit. That means that all 4 chronicles have to have been doctored or forged for this theory to be correct. Otherwise, I mean, they're not 100%, they're not all there, but 1140 is there, pretty much spot on, and 540 is there. Um, 538 was there, and that's pretty spot on for an eclipse. So this, this is software generated, so either the software's lying or the chronicles, the source material is lying. Otherwise, the software here is backing up the chronicles. So regardless of how much history is faked, what we're dealing with here is, as far as I can see, this amount of time has passed since 538 to 540 AD. The correct number of years has passed. 538. It's there. The eclipse is there. It's mentioned in the chronicles, and it's there. So that amount of time has passed since 538 till now.